Just for the record, my opinions about this film have nothing to do with Ezra Miller's real life, shall we say, indiscretions. I am a firm believer in separating the art from the artist whenever possible, and that is what I intend to do here. Anyway, with all that being said, this movie is a gigantic mess. But before we get started, as always, a quick thank you to my patron over on Patreon. And if you enjoy the content I make and would like to offer your support for as little as $1 a month, you can get your name listed right here at the start of every video. Link to that is in the description below. And now, let's get into the actual review.
What's the play? Batman, what do we do?
We try not to die.
It's not Clark.
My name is Kara.
I'm Barry. We're Barry.
The Flash is the newest entry in the DCEU that tells the story of Barry Allen, played by Ezra Miller, who tries to use his abilities of running around really fast to travel back in time to try to save his loved ones, but in doing so accidentally has created a problem of epic proportions that could wipe out entire worlds. I'm not going to mince words, this is an awful movie. Not kinda sorta bad or bad for a blockbuster film, I mean a level of catastrophe that is rarely seen for a film of this magnitude. Let's start with, by far, the most obvious issue. People have already been talking about it on social media, and it's true, this movie is ugly. This is some of the worst visual effects I have seen in any film ever. No, not worst in any film in recent memory, I mean worst in any film I've ever seen. At least older movies had an excuse of CGI being new. What's this movie's excuse? And no, well, it was supposed to look bad on purpose is not a good excuse. Just, no, this looks awful and it's embarrassing. The visual effects genuinely look like they're video game assets from cutscenes in the PS1 and GameCube era. It looks unfinished. But, okay, bad visual effects are one thing, even if the effects are horrendous. Sometimes, if a film story is strong enough, it can overcome poor VFX. Too bad they decided they didn't want to actually make this movie good. This is a film in which none of the pieces of the story they decided to tell fit together even remotely. Now, a well-crafted film can take seemingly disconnected parts and carefully weave them together in a beautiful tapestry. This film is the equivalent of a kid trying to force puzzle pieces together with a claw hammer. The story beats of this film feel erratic and engineered, almost like a slideshow, regardless of logic or reason. This feels less like a movie and more an excuse to try to cram in as many cameos from older properties in a desperate attempt to earn some nostalgia points as humanly possible. The story takes a backseat to whatever studio note the screenwriter was given and told to cram into this monstrosity. Every single element clashes together violently. There are no smooth segues to anything. Plot elements will be built up and then randomly dropped. Others come out of nowhere with no build-up at all. There is an air of pointlessness that pervades nearly every single frame of this movie. This film spends well over an hour promising and building up to what is supposed to be this explosive climax with really high stakes, bringing back an old villain for the heroes to team up and go against, and the climax ultimately amounts to absolutely nothing. It's meaningless and an abject waste of time, and it punishes you for actually caring about anything that's going on in the story. As a result, there is no sense of catharsis to the events that unfold, as it concludes with the cinematic equivalent of an apathetic shrug, even going so far as to have the main character literally undercut the whole entire point of the movie by making a change in the past in order to save a loved one, even though he literally went on an entire journey and an entire character arc explaining why that was a bad thing. The third act in this film is so awful that by the time the film ended, I wanted to throw something at the screen. There will be many fans that will see how this film treats Michael Keaton's Batman as an insult to those that actually wanted to see his return. And let me tell you, if you were even the least bit excited or interested to see Sasha Calle's portrayal as Supergirl, get ready to be absolutely pissed off with what they did to her. And while we're on the subject of characters, we might as well take a look at Barry Allen. You know, both versions. Now, I do kind of like this idea of a future self being annoyed by a past version of himself. This has been done many other times beforehand, sometimes to great effect. But there's a teensy-weensy little bit of a problem with this one. Yeah, the younger Barry Allen is annoying. He is actively obnoxious, and not in a way where he's more irritating to the other characters than he is to us. I mean, Ezra Miller's performance as him is pretty grating. This is a case where the filmmakers thought that the character was a lot funnier than he actually was. The older Barry Allen is at least better and more passable and does have his selfless moments, although there are times where he is honestly kind of a tosser for really no reason. Like when he criticizes a woman for not immediately thanking him after he saved her, and for stealing a random pedestrian's hot dog just because he was hungry. Now, I want to be clear. I understand what they were trying to do. I understand why the characters, particularly the young Barry Allen, were written in this way, especially with regards to the big reveal. And honestly, the idea for the reveal isn't bad in and of itself. It's actually kind of interesting. But the issue is that, one, that doesn't change the fact that he's not at all endearing to the audience, which isn't helped by Miller's largely poor performance of him, and it also doesn't change the fact that it doesn't really feel properly built up. It has the bare minimum for what could be constituted a setup, because we got to make room for all the other stuff that is jammed into this movie. And on that note of way too many things happening, this film seems to be DC's answer to Marvel's Multiverse in their films. And yeah, they butcher it badly here. The way the multiverse works in the Marvel films is a lot simpler and a lot easier to understand. In this one, they kind of treat time travel as if it has a ripple effect working both forward and backward at the same time, even though that doesn't really make any sense. Like, somehow Barry traveling like 15 years into the past somehow had effects that stretched well before that point, unless they're trying to argue that he's not actually traveling back in time, but has instead crossed over into an alternate timeline where the 2 points just happen to intersect. But then in that case, does that mean he's not really time traveling and therefore hasn't actually changed the past? I mean, they try to explain this, but they explain it very badly. The way time travel in the multiverse operates in this universe feels horribly inconsistent, and feels more like an excuse for James Gunn to just keep whatever he wants and throw away whatever he doesn't. And that's not even getting into how the Tim Burton version of Batman, assuming that this is the same Batman and not just another Batman from another timeline that happens to look exactly like him, somehow knows exactly how time travel works, despite there being no real reason for why he would, unless he was just guessing. Oh, and this one has the gall to call out Back to the Future as not how real time travel works. Yeah, that's right. Throw stones at a movie far better than yours and see how that goes for you. Every single positive thing I can say about this film is inexorably linked with some sort of caveat. Michael Keaton is good as Batman, and it's good to see him back in action, and some of his fight scenes are even cool. But that's undercut by what his appearance ultimately amounts to. There's a nice emotional scene near the end that Ezra Miller actually manages to pull off with some semblance of gravitas that would be great out of context. The problem is that in context, the scene doesn't make any sense, and it undercuts the entire point that the film had been building to. And unfortunately, this film's negatives far outweigh its positives. The Flash is an amalgamation of every single thing that is wrong with modern-day superhero films. A story that plays second fiddle to how many cameos can be jammed onto the screen, horrendous visual effects that make it ugly to look at, banking solely on nostalgia to sell tickets, forced awkward humor that doesn't fit in with the tone of the scene, and an empty climax totally devoid of substance. The only enjoyment I got out of this film was looking for scenes that would be hilarious when taken out of context, given Ezra Miller's real-life legal troubles. And, not surprisingly, there were a lot. Bottom line, this film is a horrific mess. Despite all the kerfuffle with the casting of Ezra Miller, I was actually hoping that this would be good. I was genuinely hoping that maybe the DCEU could step up and deliver something great. But, my word, they did not. The Flash gets an empty shot. And I guess that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you want to see my early thoughts of any film I watch or to read more of my reviews, make sure to check out my Letterboxd account. The link to that is in the description below. And make sure that you're subscribed so that you don't miss any upcoming reviews. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.